and welcome to the July 12th Oshkosh Common Council meeting. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Hanson. Here. Miller. Wojciechowski.
Here.
Erickson.
Here.
Ford.
Here.
Mugerauer.
Here.
Palmieri.
Here. And Councilmember Hanson will lead us in the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
As we gather tonight, we are grateful for the good things that have come to this city. May our decisions always be ones that are for the well-being of all whom we govern.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next we have an introduction of staff with the fire department. Chief?
Good evening and thank you. I have the privilege this evening of introducing our two newest battalion chiefs. Recently, council approved a new battalion chief position, and Drew Jager will be filling that role, so I'll let him introduce himself and say a couple words.
Good evening, wow, that's a horrible start, isn't it? Good evening, Mayor Palmieri and council members. I'm Drew Jager. I've been lucky enough to be a member of the Oshkosh Fire Department for approaching 23 years now. And after moving to the community in 99 and meeting my wife Meredith, who's here with us, and we have 3 children. We love the community here. I've earned the trust of the fire department, and the chief has seen fit to promote me to an amazing level of responsibility as a battalion chief, where I'll be some of the days of the week I'll be the shift commander for the city, along with other administrative duties. When I'm not at work, I like to hunt and fish and take advantage of the live music and other great things that this community has to offer. So I'm humbled and very much looking forward to serving the community in this new role. Thank you.
Thank you, and congratulations.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
As many of you know, our Assistant Chief, John Zemer, will retire Friday after 32 years of service with the Oshkosh Fire Department. So I want to make sure to recognize and thank him for all he's done. So that will create an opening for Battalion Chief Jason Shikoski, and I'll let him introduce himself as well. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members, city staff, and others. Some of you I'm meeting for the first time, and others I've known for a number of years now, but very honored to be a member of the City of Oshkosh Fire Department for over 25 years. I've been here since 1997, and recently promoted to Battalion Chief of B Shift, one of our 3 shifts in the department. So very honored and blessed to be there and be representing the city and guiding our other firefighters in their daily endeavors. On a side note, I have a lovely wife and 3 children, and they're my boys, 19 and 21, and they're both looking to get into the fire service as well. In the EMT basic program right now, and going to further their education with firefighting and paramedic, and perhaps one day they'll be standing up here as well. So honored to be here, and thank you for your time.
Welcome and thank you. Congratulations.
Congratulations to you both.
So I just noticed Chief Yeager's shirt. I think we can spring for a new shirt. He's no longer lieutenant. So.
All right, well, we will move into our one and only public hearing this evening, Resolution 22-277. Do we have anyone registered for this item? I don't see anybody on our new list here on the screen.
No one under this item.
All right, so we'll take well, I'll read the public hearing 3 times. Resolution 22-277, approve submittal of 2022 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan. Plan Commission recommends approval. Second reading, approve submittal of 2022 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan. Plan Commission recommends approval. And the third and final reading, approve submittal of 2022 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan. Plan Commission recommends approval. We could have a motion and a second.
Second.
Discussion. We have Ms. Nyforth from Community Development here with us tonight. If I could ask Kelly, two things. One is with regard to the $119,000 for fair housing, does that full amount get contracted out to Northeast Wisconsin Fair Housing Council?
No. It's actually administration and fair housing, so only 19,000 goes for fair housing. And it actually goes to the the Metropolitan Milwaukee Fair Housing Council, which handles our fair housing complaints.
And the other 100,000 goes to,
Administration for staff to administer the program, any costs that we might incur administering the program.
do we actually have fair housing complaints coming in that we've addressed?
We do have a few. We've had a few. We don't have a lot. Once in a while, we receive one, but it's pretty rare that we do receive one, and most of the time it's settled or, before it would ever have to have any other city staff involvement.
I guess one of the questions from the community is, if someone did have a fair housing complaint, how would they submit that?
Right. There's multiple, ways that they can. We do have information on our website for fair housing if somebody has any questions, and we try to put posters up throughout the city and City Hall too, and many different community organizations would have that contact information too. If you'd call United Way or any, other governmental agencies should be able to help somebody who may have a complaint.
Thank you. Second question is, I noticed in the Plan Commission minutes that there were some questions about contact with the neighborhood associations and those CDBG dollars that may be directed. Could you talk a little bit about what the new part of this is and trying to direct some of those dollars into some of the recognized neighborhood associations?
Sure. We do work with the Go H&I, the Greater Oshkosh Healthy Neighborhood Initiative, to help us kind of spread the word about our action plan. So we were at the February Alliance meeting where staff discussed the plan, and we also had multiple other public meetings and outreach, that was done to try to gather comment. So we are looking at ways to partner with different organizations such as Habitat for Humanity. When they did the Rock the Block this year, we had allocated some funds in our annual allocation of CDBG funds to help fund that. And also just, the blight removal that we do, we also, try to look at certain neighborhoods to see if, there's anything that, if there's a house that's really dilapidated, if we could help it and take it down to help the neighborhood as a whole. So it's not, we don't have any funds allocated for like specific neighborhood associations, but a lot of the activities that go on within those neighborhood associations, that's supported through the CDBG annual allocation we receive.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the CDBG action plan? All right, please call the roll.
Hanson,
Aye.
Wojciechowski,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 6.
All right, we'll move to citizen statements, and this evening we do have, looks like James Nichols, 813 Grove. If you could step right up here, sir. And council, statements to council are limited to 5 minutes, but please go ahead, welcome.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today I come to talk about a pretty pressing matter, I would say, around the entire world, and that is obviously climate change. And one of the beginning things that we could do to not only help the community, but to hopefully set an example for any other following committee after that. And that would be to follow the example of a man in southern England where he started an agroforestry business, not necessarily a business. But he created an entire forest, an entire ecosystem full of animals, bugs, insects, the whole nine, including medicinal plants, vegetables, fruits, and it was a thriving ecosystem within itself. It had 7 different layers. And I came to propose that we use any unused park space or any unused land whatsoever within city limits to do this. And who would maintain it would be the homeless individuals that you see roaming the streets asking for money. You give them fair housing, pay them a minimum wage stipend, and their main purpose and priority is to care for the land and every bit of shrubbery, tree, or anything else that is involved with it. And I recently talked to the mayor about it. I called her and asked about it, and I would personally like to see it get started up. And I think it could be the first step to a really good, sustainable way of living for the city, and hopefully setting the example for others. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we also talked about you may possibly also approach the Sustainability Advisory Board
Yes.
to have kind of a fuller conversation about that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to consent agenda. Do we have-
Mayor? Oh, we have one person under consent agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed Tom Brown, 111 East Ripple Avenue. Tom Brown, registered for agenda item 13. Calling again, Tom Brown. I'm sorry, Mr. Brown, if you're joining us a little bit later, perhaps we can come back. But we are going to move on with the consent agenda. All right, a motion and a second for consent.
So moved.
Second?
Discussion on consent. Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, just wanted to point out that it's, he had emailed me, Thomas Brown, about item 13, which is the conditional use permit to establish a restaurant land at 1675 Oregon Street, and he spoke at Plan Commission as well and was in favor, so I don't know if he's here for something else, but I have a feeling that's what that was about.
Okay. Any other discussion on consent agenda? All right, please call the roll.
Hanson.
Aye.
Wojciechowski.
Aye.
Erickson.
Aye.
Ford.
Aye.
Mugrower.
Aye.
Palmieri.
Aye.
Carried 6.
All right, we'll move on to new ordinances. We have one new ordinance this evening. It will not be voted on. It will come back to council at the following meeting. That's ordinance 22-307, approve zone change from suburban mixed-use district, SMU, to suburban mixed-use district with a planned development overlay for properties located at 350 to 600 South Kohler Street. Plan Commission recommends approval. Looks like Mr. Lyons is here to talk about that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, as we were evaluating some potential development in that area, we realized a large number of those lots have several non-conforming situations. So staff in this instance is trying to be a little proactive and get a PD in place on those properties ahead of time. So as redevelopment or improvements need to be made on those properties, there's one less step that those property owners have to go through.
Any other questions or discussion? Thank you. We will move on to new resolutions. Resolution 22-308, approve fee schedule for sewer use charges. Motion and a second, council?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on sewer use charges? Seeing none, please call, oh, Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, Mayor, I was a little slow on that one.
That's all right.
This one's probably more for city manager. If you wouldn't mind, we're 7 months past the contract expiration for the townships that we support with our public utility. Just, it may be appropriate at some point to discuss where we are in that process in trying to negotiate those agreements going forward. Obviously, this will have an impact, or it should have an impact on the services that we provide to those other entities.
Yeah, I believe the city attorney has provided you with an update on that. So how it directly impacts with this rate increase, how it does or doesn't, I think we can take a look at that. I don't know if the folks from Ellers, I know they're online tonight. I don't know if they could answer that, but is John Cameron on? John, are you available?
Yes, hi, Mark. I am available.
Good evening. Thank you. I don't know if you caught the deputy mayor's question regarding the impact of this increase on I guess, the wholesale rate to the various sanitary districts. Is that a fair way to word it, Matt? At
That's
least
fair,
for now.
but also just the agreements in general and their status.
Yeah, that's not John's
roles.
category.
Yep.
But I think the city attorney has provided you with a memo. But John, what's the impact on the wholesale rates?
So the wholesale rates in this rate update follow the same methodology as the existing contract. So they do not take into consideration anything that's being proposed with the ongoing discussions with the sanitary districts. There is an impact to the sanitary districts that's somewhat similar to what you see for city customers, but they generally follow suit with the existing contracts.
Thank you.
Yeah, I see Mr. Van Gompel's also available. I'm not sure if he was poised to say something or not. I don't want to put Russ on the spot. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Russ?
No, I think John pretty much covered it. We had thought we could get by the year without any increase on the sewer rates, but we had some issues with the billing register and the consumption register tying out. So in final analysis, our consumption is a little bit less than what we had anticipated at budget time. And that, along with other costs, operational cost increases, we're recommending increase at this time. Probably should be good enough to hold us through 2023.
And I guess if I could ask a follow-up question. So when we're looking at the monthly connection charge, the current is $10.79, increased to $11.36, and then the volume charge from $5.61 to $6.18, that 4.34 cubic feet costs of $35.14 to $38.18. Is that an average for households, the 4.34? I'm sorry, I'm on page 2 of the supporting documentation. Is the 434 an average?
I can answer that question, Mayor. Yes, that represents the average for a typical single-family household in the city.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other discussion? All right, just for sake of clarity, so this would be a 9.42% increase to revenues necessary to fund those operations and the debt service on sewer service. A 5.6% increase in operating and maintenance between 21 and 22. If there's nothing further, please call the roll.
Hanson,
Aye.
Wojciechowski,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Mugerauer,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 6.
And Resolution 22309, approve specific implementation plan for a mixed-use development for the properties located on the east side of South Main Street. Plan Commission recommends approval.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Would this be Mark or Kelly to give a little summary of this?
We can take team. Go ahead, Mark. I'll let you talk kind of more from a plan. Well, actually, let me talk just kind of a little background. This is RDA property that the city, the RDA, had acquired. It's probably been about 10 years they've started acquiring it. And it was probably in 2020, I think we went out for an RFP and chose T-Wall as a developer to look at potentially developing the site. So we've been working with them very closely on this development and are really excited to see how it's going to revitalize our South Shore in that area between South Main Street and the Pioneer. So I'll let Mark talk a little bit, some of the highlights that we'll see in the phases for the development.
Thank you. So this is the second step in our plan development approval process for the Sawdust District Mill on Main project. This came before council for a rezone and general development plan back in March of this year. Applicant is looking at doing a 3-phase mixed-use development. The first 2 phases including both residential and commercial. The third phase at this time is planned for residential only. It's a really unique development, nothing we have seen like this in the city before. Includes some exciting additional gateway features to really identify the Sawdust District, including a very unique Sawdust District Mill on Main roof sign that is oriented out towards the river, a very large Sawdust District blade sign to help identify the area along South Main Street. They mix in a number of publicly accessible amenities, having some additional green space, and really an inviting development, trying to get people to come in and through development for both the shops, the access to the river as well. They have a very large 2-story restaurant in the north end of the building A1 that should provide a nice restaurant space with some access and some views out to the river. So it's a really unique, cool, mixed-use development that we have not seen the likes of before here.
Thank you. Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, Mark, can you tell us a little bit about the dog park and who might be able to access that?
Yeah, so on the south side of the 9th Street extension, the applicant is proposing about a 1-acre dog park that at this point they are intending to be open to the public. So residents both within this development and outside this development would have access to that dog park.
Thanks.
So as public access, then who maintains that?
So the developer would be maintaining the dog park.
All right. Well, that is an exciting downtown feature. Any other questions or comments? I'm really excited about the amount of green space that they incorporated in here, and that access to the river, the newly minted section of Riverwalk down there. Haven't tried it yet, but I'm getting down there this weekend. All right. Thank you very much. We have no further discussion. Please call the roll on 22-309.
Hanson,
Aye.
Wojciechowski,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Mugerauer,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 6.
All right, we are on to council discussion and direction to city manager and future agenda items. First up is procedure for placement of items on committee, board, and commission agendas. Councilmember Wojciechowski.
Thank you, Mayor. So really, I guess this was kind of spurred from having conversations with different committee members and just, I don't want to say like an incident because it's not really like, it's not to point fingers, but there were issues with committee members for DEI at least, and I don't know if this has happened at other committees, requesting an item that was left off the agenda, and the specific incident had to do with Dora, and I felt a little silly after being notified after the fact of me saying that DEI didn't have a chance to talk about Dora when in fact it was requested 2 months prior to us actually voting on it, but I was not aware of that until the day after we had already voted on it. But really, whether council entertains the idea of maybe relooking at how the procedure is worded or the process, I just feel like it needs to be relooked at and reemphasized that if we keep the same process that it's followed, because in the writing, it gives the department manager or department director of that committee basically the authority to, or the discretion to leave an item off an agenda if it, for a number of reasons, and it lists them, and, some pretty reasonable reasons, if it has nothing to do with the committee's jurisdiction, et cetera. And if that's the case, the next step is to notify the committee members of that decision if they decide to leave it off. But the committee has the option to vote if they disagree with, that item being left off the agenda. Then it goes to the city manager, et cetera, et cetera. Eventually, it could make its way to council to decide if we want to keep it on the agenda. And in that instance, our committee was never notified that Dora was left off the agenda. There was an email sent to 2 members of that board, but the rest of the committee was never informed, so we never had an opportunity to vote on whether we wanted it to be on the agenda because there were members who did want to discuss it. So I guess whether it was a misunderstanding or it was that it was never notified to the committee. I just hope that in the future that we follow this process if this is the process that we're going to have.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Councilmember Wojciechowski. Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, City Manager Roloff, could you speak to the history of that policy and explain whether or not it applies? Someone had emailed me saying it only applied to DEI, and I think it's important that we correct that.
Yeah, sure. I believe back in January, the council had approved this new policy. This was requested actually through the board and commission chair. So, and staff has been following that. But I think sometimes there's some misunderstandings. Something that, in the case of Dora, the DEI committee had asked that it be discussed by them before it had been presented to council. And I felt that was inappropriate for a committee to take up something before council has even had the opportunity to look at it. Subsequent to that, the DEI committee failed to reach a quorum on 2 consecutive meetings. So that kind of closed the window on their ability to do it. So that's the reason that happened. And if you look at the chart that was adopted, my interpretation was that this was definitely in the DEI's realm and would have been appropriate for them to discuss. And I had no objection to that, but it was just the timing at the time of the request, but then circumstances being what they were, they didn't have a chance to meet afterwards. Had they met, I would have welcomed their input on the matter.
Did you have any follow-up, Councilmember Ford?
Well, can you speak to whether or not it applies to every board and commission?
It applies to all the boards and commissions except those that have quasi-judicial authority, police and fire commission, board of appeals, some plan commission items. But we do go through that process, but unlike the council, any single council member can ask an item to be put on the agenda, such as what Councilmember Wojciechowski just did this evening. That can be done with the committee. It's got to go to the committee, and the committee has to say, this is something that we want to discuss. And once they do, then it's interpreted that is it within their jurisdiction, and I can certainly say that I don't think it's in their jurisdiction as the policy states. And even if I interpret it one way, whether it's a jurisdictional issue or whatever the disagreement might be, they can always appeal that. So that's something that they can do. In this case, it was really just a matter of a quorum issue. In this case, I would have welcomed their input.
Last comment, it's not a question, but just that process exists. Correct me if I'm wrong, fellow colleagues, but it was born of a frustration among this group with the lack of a process. So we can be blamed for that process being in existence, correct?
There were, boards and commissions who had requested a clarification of how to move things from boards and commissions to and through council. Yes, that's correct. I guess I just wanted to follow up and ask, so since that board did meet prior to the next council meeting, would it not then have gone on, because they did meet the night before council, why would it not have gone on the agenda then, since it had been requested, even though the quorum had not made it possible previously? Wouldn't it or shouldn't it have, number one? Number two, would not the council liaison be copied in on those things to be made aware of the request?
There's no requirement that the council liaison is involved in this process. That wasn't identified in the process. Certainly, that may have been appropriate as a courtesy, but that's not required. I cannot speak to what happened other than that there wasn't a quorum for those meetings. I don't know. I don't have any recollection if it was on the agenda or not.
But they did meet quorum at the very next meeting, which was prior to the council meeting, June 27th. So it seems like it should have gone on that agenda, but it had already been denied based on discretion.
It was not denied. It was that it wasn't appropriate to put it on the fact that, I don't know the answer to why it wasn't on the June 27th agenda.
Councilmember Wojciechowski.
Yeah, and I'm not, trying to say that, like, what you did was wrong, or that, like, because the process, like, as I'm reading it, like, I see that's the process that we have. I think where the confusion or frustration from other members is that the communication is not made clear to all the members. As it says, the division manager, department director shall inform the board or commission of the request and determination. And there was confusion because I had some members saying, oh, well, we did request this. And I'm like, well, I didn't know because I was not, the committee was not told. So it's just, people hearing different things leads to misunderstandings of what happened along the process. And obviously this is the process we created, so that didn't happen. So I'm just saying, I think in the future, it is the discretion of that department manager or head, for those many reasons that are listed, why they would not want to put it on the agenda. I just hope in the future that the board or commission is notified, because if we do feel strongly one way, as it's written in here, we do have the ability to vote against that, if that makes sense.
Sure. I think that's a fair request.
And as a courtesy, although it's not specifically stated in the policy that we would, I guess the question is, would council like to see the council reps who are on those boards and commissions also copied in on that? Councilmember Ford.
I guess I don't follow. I was under the impression this was a citizen request. So are we telling a citizen to make sure to copy?
No, this was a board member request.
I think.
Oh, yes, please.
I think it's in the case of if a member of the committee requests, because usually, like, I don't know how all the other committees do it, but at least for the two I'm on, at the end of the meeting, there's like a section for future agenda items. So those are set in person, so obviously everyone there knows. But many times, agenda items will be requested via email after the fact. So I think if a member requests an item, not necessarily saying everyone needs to be informed of that, but if an item is denied from a member or even a citizen request, I feel like the committee needs to be made aware, as it states in the rules that we passed.
Okay. So sorry.
Yes.
Follow the process.
Go ahead.
So again, I'm just trying to follow what happened here. So if you have a citizen, maybe I misspoke when I said citizen, a citizen member of that committee.
Yes.
So aside from telling them that they should copy the liaison?
I think I was suggesting that
force
perhaps the staff member that they put the request through.
Okay, so you want to have the liaison to the committee
I don't know how it would happen.
notified if they contact
If
the
there's,
staff liaison?
if there's a request that
That's right,
gets
the citi-
denied,
Okay.
that it's just kind of confirming what Councilmember Wojciechowski is asking, that it come back to the committee, but even though the DEI council liaison is not a voting member, that the consideration would be given to also include them in that notification from staff.
Okay. Okay, so that's.
I don't think that created a problem in this case. I think the council member was not aware, the council liaison wasn't, but recognize that over half our boards and commissions don't have council liaisons. So that wouldn't be the case. I was trying to look at some things here. I think what happened was after we said it's not appropriate to put it down the board or commission, there wasn't a subsequent discussion to request that it be on the next agenda. So I think it just didn't go anywhere because
It's a new process.
Yeah, and I think I think the person was caught up in the fact that we said no, it's inappropriate, that it was a blanket no, and perhaps, and I say staff takes some responsibility for that as well, but I think maybe it was interpreted as a hard no, like no, never, we won't put it on. It was really more, we can't put it on until it's been brought before council. Then we could bring it up, but I think that's something we could do. As a courtesy to other council members, we could have the liaison, but I don't think that presented a problem in this case.
Well, and I guess because every other board and commission where there is a council liaison, they are voting members except for this one. So otherwise, they would get it just as a notification that, hey, this has been denied, and you do have the opportunity of putting it on the agenda for voting to move it up the chain.
The DEI committee is the only committee where the council member is in voting. We don't treat that member any differently than we do council members who are voting members of a committee. That wasn't staff's intent.
Okay, yes.
And this is more for clarification on process, because it isn't exactly outlined, but it just says, like the division manager, department head shall inform the board or commission of the request and determination. Is that specified, is that in person? Is that via email that they're letting the board or commission know that an item that was requested has been denied? Because this is really what the process for members of that committee to, make that decision. Give them enough time to say, well, this item I requested was denied, but I feel strongly that that was, wrong, and we want to do the procedure voting,
Yeah, I don't know what happened the evening that it was not on the agenda. Mr. Fitzpatrick may, I don't know if Mr. Fitzpatrick was at that meeting or not, but he could certainly speak to that.
I wasn't at the 627 meeting, but everything that you've discussed, in terms of the chronology is correct. So, and just to provide a little more clarity, the issue of DORA was going to come before the council the day after the request was made to put it on the DEI agenda. So it was my recommendation that it not be placed on the DEI agenda. I also suggested that if members of the DEI committee wanted to learn more about DORA, they could tune in or attend the council meeting the very next day. And then subsequent to that, they would have the opportunity to bring it up again. But as City Manager Roloff mentioned, there were in the 2 months that took place after that, they unfortunately didn't have a quorum, so that didn't take place. And then that individual who brought the issue forward did not indicate to Michelle, who is the staff liaison to that group, that they wanted to appeal per the policy or wanted to place it on the agenda again or request that it be placed on the agenda again. So it was never placed on the agenda again. So
are you saying that it's up to that individual or that person who requests it that the denial be, then they are required to do the request to put it on the next agenda?
I'm not saying that. I'm just trying to state what actually took place.
Okay.
So they certainly could have requested from Michelle. They could have said, hey, I didn't get a chance to go to the DORA meeting or watch any of the information about it, and I'd like to appeal it per the policy or place it on the agenda again. What's the next step? But there was, to my knowledge, no inquiry or no information associated with it. And then the only meeting that took place after that was the meeting immediately before the council acted on the DORA issue, which was the Monday before the Tuesday council meeting. So that's my recollection of the chronology of it, if that's helpful.
All right. Well, maybe since it is a new process, that could be reiterated to the boards and commissions about that flow and how they can appeal or revisit if they disagree with the decision. Do other council members have any questions? All right, thank you. So we are now at the discussion item for scheduling of consideration of fee to replace special assessments.
I'm certainly happy to give a brief overview of what council received on July 1st in their weekly packet. It's a memo from Mr. Robbie on update on where we were with R.A. Smith of Jeff Mazonik of R.A. Smith on the potential for a transportation utility fee. Probably the best summary is something I can put on the screen, which is the second page in your packet. This is something that was put together by Mr. Mazonik. You may recall that there was a discussion about needing to update estimated traffic generation factors with the new manual from the Institute of Traffic Engineers. Jake, if you could put up that screen. It is on your second sheet, so I'll draw it to your attention. Pretty much what it was based on was estimated costs from our history of capital improvements and how much we've been assessing in recent years, and it comes to about $3.25 million. And when you add fixed costs for a utility of $550,000, you'll see the screen has about a $3.8 million allocation to various property uses. The one that gains the most attention, obviously, is single family. And what that comes to is an administrative fee of $17, which applies to each and every parcel, regardless of land use, because that's, it doesn't matter how big or small a bill is. That's pretty much overhead associated with each account. For residential, based on the traffic generation manual of 9.43 trips per day per dwelling unit, that comes to $37.72. So a total annual fee of $54.72. That's the very simplified version, because that is what is for single-family residential. For other uses, you can see some of the examples that were put up. Light industrial, manufacturing, varying sizes, as well as more high traffic generation land uses such as a supermarket or home improvement store, a convenience store, gas station. Those are some of the higher ones, upwards of $18,000 for a home improvement superstore. While that seems like a very high number, think about the amount of traffic that they generate versus your own individual house. Similarly, those types of uses, compare that to what they might see for a special assessment, which could run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars for, think of how big some of those commercial sites are. So that just gives you a flavor for what that is. This gets us to about 95% of where we need to be. How much single family would change based on this 95% certainty? Little to none. It would tweak it by plus or minus, a few cents. Obviously, for different land uses, more mixed uses, think of any mixed use strip mall along Keller or Washburn or something like that. That's going to vary based on if you put an accounting office in there versus a fast food place. Drastic difference in land use, drastic difference in traffic generation. And if a land use change, we would have to consider that land use change and adjust the bill accordingly, because the traffic generation is different. So you can see that those multi-use types of areas would have to be looked at a little more closely, and could very well change, any time. I mean, we've had discussions about land use changes along Keller for what's the old Golden Corral, which could be 2 fast food restaurants, a different type of traffic generation. That's why we're not at 100%, but our confidence factor is very high. This is where we're at, and I think the idea was for me to summarize this. Certainly want to answer any questions you might have. I would say if you had any questions of a legal nature about our authority, because I know that some of you have received some correspondence from Chamber of Commerce, and in the past, we've received correspondence from Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce Council, and they're entering lawsuits elsewhere. I would suggest that the council request a closed session for those discussions, because we feel we're well within our home rule rights to institute this fee, but certainly people disagree with that interpretation. I respectfully disagree with that, but I would prefer, and so would the city attorney, that we have a discussion in closed session because that is a strategy type of thing. This is where we're at, where we take this. I think we talked in the past about being very transparent and be willing to take, whatever critique that might come from something like this. I'm certainly willing to do that, but I welcome council's thoughts and comments about how you would like us to next proceed with a public information or anything else.
So as far as a schedule for us to consider this, so we'd be looking at a potential closed session. If I may ask the clerk, if this were to go to an advisory referendum ballot measure question, what would be the time frame for a fall question on the ballot cutoff?
In order for an advisory referendum to be on the November ballot, all of the information would have to be submitted to the county clerk prior to the end of August. So you'd have to determine the question, and you'd also have to determine what a no and what a yes response to that question means, so that that can be clear to the public.
So end of August.
Yes. And you'd also have to know within there that the intent is an advisory referendum, which would not carry a requirement of you to follow.
Sure.
So the practical side of that is August 23rd. If we're being just practical, that's your last council meeting in August.
So the format of the question and what the answer that prevails,
Right.
the if-then piece of that.
You'd also, need to feel that your constituency would have an opportunity to understand that question and be prepared to vote for it in the beginning of November. So.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Ford. I didn't see that.
No, do we have a list of the municipalities that have adopted this? Something like this? Sorry to put you on the spot.
The short answer is yes, though. The
Yeah.
answer is where are they? The answer is where are they? I think Mr. Mazonik had made a presentation back last fall, and I'm clicking through that as we speak.
Yeah,
There's a list of them, yeah.
The reason I asked that is one of the slides from the presentation talks about having the League of Municipalities recommendation that there's a process for allowing properties that demonstrate reduced use of the street system to qualify for a lower fee. And I'd just be curious to see what those appeal processes have looked like in practice.
We have not ever gotten into the weeds on that specific question. I think the city of Pewaukee is probably the best example that would apply to us right now, and I could certainly find out in pretty short order what that process is. Mr. Mazonik may be aware of it, but we could certainly find out if necessary. And it sounds like Mr. Robbie has something to add to that conversation. So
again, sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's okay.
I believe not only the village of Pewaukee, but also the city of Wisconsin Rapids are currently active in charging, and there are many other that are at various stages of consideration. So we would just have to look at what their ordinances said as far as an appeals process.
You gave me a weekend task here too, so I can go find them.
Yeah, those are the two that I'm aware of that Mr. Mazonik has worked with that have gone through the implementation and are invoicing already.
Okay, thank you.
So then are you looking for some dates from council for a possible closed session first?
Not necessarily. If you want a closed session to talk about the legal issues, we need to schedule one sometime in the near future. But what else we do in addition to that, because that's just the legal side of things, but educating the public, whether or not council wants to go an advisory referendum or simply just get out on the street and just do some public education on it. That's probably more what I was thinking about for some discussion and direction from council. We can do the closed session almost any time.
Councilmember Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. This is certainly going to get challenged legally, and this is more of a political issue outside of our wonderful community. I want to just caution everybody at not being the guinea pig on this one. I think that all of us up here want to find some way to take away the pain of the excessive special assessment, i.e. corner lots, things like that, and I think there's probably a better way to go about that. I don't want to tie the city up. I don't want to tie us up in court. This is going to get challenged till the cows come home, and depending on who's holding office in Madison, this could all be over in a blink of an eye. So I guess I don't want to spend a lot of our attorneys or outside counsel's money or time, and perhaps we can think of some creative ways to lessen the burden in the interim until this thing gets figured out. But I just think addressing this at this time is going to be a hornet's nest, and it's going to be a prolonged process. And I guess I don't want our community to take the lead on that, is my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
It does seem that we've been in this position for quite some time, and, you know, over the years with the reduced shared revenues coming back, you know, this was one of the, it's not an elegant, 100% elegant solution, but we've been kind of forced into this position to try to address this. And I don't know if Deputy Mayor would like to weigh in on this, but he's been here on this topic since the beginning. And as long-range finance, it's gone through there, it's gone through a special ad hoc committee. Am I putting you on your spot?
No, not at all. I've got no problem being put on the spot. I had planned on just listening tonight a lot. Yeah, the issue, I don't know that I've been here since the beginning of it. The beginning was way before me, actually, well before me, but it has been on our radar for the last 4 years. There have been some different iterations worked on and brought to council. One voted on, one not considered for a vote. I respect Councilmember Miller's point. You know, this is already in the legal realm a bit. To let that play out is definitely I respect him for that position. I disagree, but I respect that position. I don't have a whole lot to say on this one tonight. Council's given some direction already to city staff to move this forward. If there's an interest in not moving forward, then this council needs to say that very clearly, very early. If its intention is to go down a path and then to not go with it, I think we would be a lot better served by not even going through the process if that's council's, you know, discussion and decision. But it is time for this body to make a decision on it. No other ad hoc group, no other long-range finance doesn't need to see this again, I don't believe. I think it's time for this body, the elected representatives, to say how they feel about the topic, as well as if this is a viable method that they support or not.
Councilmember Ford.
That's fair. I mean, I think I'd like to see this continue moving forward, to answer your question directly. I do have serious concerns. I don't want us to be put into a position where we pass something, cause a lot of issues in our community, and then it's immediately stayed, doesn't go into effect, and we're in a prolonged legal battle, and then ultimately we lose and we don't solve the issue. That's my main concern. Now, there's a lot of moving parts there, right? A lot of things can happen. I do think it's worthwhile to have a closed session to talk a little bit about the legalese. I mean, there's certain things I'd like to understand about what we anticipate the length of a legal process to be, or there's something where there's going to be multiple municipalities together. I think it'd be helpful to have more information about what that would look like, and understand that that needs to be in closed session. So I do think that's helpful. I'd also like options. I've been working through options in my head, some good, some bad. And that's what I think, so it could very well be the opposite, but I do know that they're not good, all of them. One of the things I'd like to do is explore at least what a cost estimate would look like to put a cap on special assessments, so at the very least, we can get at some of the major symptom of the problem, which is these exorbitant assessments. I understand there could be some equity issues there to make sure we're treating people fairly, but whether that's a first dollar match on assessments or whether that's somehow tied to the percentage, to a percentage tied to property property value. I just wonder if there's more things that we can be exploring, at the very least have some information on what that would cost us if we were to find a different funding source, whether that's our tax levy, whether that's us going to referendum to exceed our levy limits for something specifically like this. And I say that not because I'm necessarily in favor of it, but I want to make sure that we have more than one option as we move ahead with the TUF.
Councilmember Erickson.
Thanks. I agree with what Councilmember Ford said. I think I'm supportive of seeing this move forward for closed session, just for our own understanding of what this, the legal issues, what our authority looks like. And I think, again, what you said with some of the options that we might have moving forward. I think if we do decide to move forward with something like this, I think that public outreach and education is going to be key, having that open communication with partners.
Councilmember Ford.
And I should clarify, we've been meeting all day, so I'm even less eloquent than normal. But my hope is to have the public to have some options in front of them so they can do a little bit of the cost-benefit analysis. So we can say, if we're going to be pushing forward with a transit utility fee, how does that compare to what it would look like if we were to try to go to referendum to exceed our levy? What would that look like compared to, if we took that right out of our tax levy, what does that mean for reduced services in other areas? I think having that information in front of the public would be part of an education effort. It would certainly help me as someone who wasn't here when this discussion started.
Well, Councilmember Ford, this is coming up with another reminder that this afternoon, Councilmember Wojciechowski raised something about, I wasn't here when you guys discussed that, and I believe we have a report on different options. It may have been a fallout of the committee. Is that what you're thinking, Deputy Mayor?
I think it came from that, between the two.
Do you remember, Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah. So let me see what we've already done, so we don't have to reinvent that wheel.
Perfect.
No pun intended, part of it was wheel tax, too. So, I mean, there were several options. But you and I have talked about, you had some other ideas. I mean, you had talked about a cap. My counter discussion was rather than do a cap, you may want to consider like a minimum that you write off, rather than put a cap, have a minimum, sort of like
Lifeline rate.
Like a lifeline rate. I mean, we had fun with you on that today. I mean, there's many different approaches on that if you want to look at special assessments. Staff has been taking the direction, and this goes back to the Deputy Mayor's comment, this predates him. Council back in 2013 started discussing special assessments, and special assessments popularity have been plummeting, not just here, but throughout Northeast Wisconsin. You've seen it elsewhere. So I think we've got some stuff to show options, but you're talking about options of special assessments, not just the fee option, but just the different. And that we haven't done, but the other stuff we have done. And let me get that for you first.
That'd be really helpful. And I know from playing Monopoly that special assessments are the worst. That's how you lose the game. Right? Every little kid knows that these things are bad. And I want to be clear to the public that's watching this at home. I like to assume they are. Right? We're committed to doing something on this. And I think we're all on the same page there. And I think Deputy Mayor Mugrauer's point is well taken, that we've given you direction to try to solve that. And perhaps selfishly, I feel like I've been given one option and asked to weigh in on it, and I would like to have some more options in front of me to, at the very least, point me in the right direction.
I guess I just, want to point out, too, that this is part of the effort to make housing more affordable in the community as well. I don't recall that anything was mentioned in our housing study with regard to this. So this is in relation and in response to that, as well as the fact that this past year, costs have risen exponentially, right, for doing these things. So our household may have paid, $6,000 5 years ago, that same cost or price tags coming in around 8 or 9, I mean, that's just a rough kind of estimate. So the timing does appear to be now for us to move forward with the discussion. And if that includes some other options, I hate to see it delayed and voted up and down, but I understand, you know, there may be some other new tools in the toolbox.
If I could, I think
Yes.
that's part of any education effort, is having those options there. It sounds like that may have already been done prior to my involvement here, but I think that is part of the public education effort, understanding the trade-offs.
And I believe Councilmember Miller and Hanson didn't have the opportunity to see that document too. I think that was predating them as well.
Yeah,
And Board of
at
Health,
least
of
4
course.
of you.
Mhm.
I think we were, sorry, Mayor, thank you. I think I was involved in the last vote we took.
Okay.
But this is morally, everybody wants to do the right thing up here. How we get there, the devil is in the details. And I give this example, and I'm sorry for boring you, but Kelly, you can look up, and I'm just going to throw something off the top of my head, but 705 Otter was my mom's house. And I think her special assessment was almost as much as what she paid for the house 25 years prior to that. And that's just, and I'm not being selfish using my mom as an example. She's dead, so she paid the tax bill. But it's not right to get a special assessment for more than what you paid for your home. It's just, it's wrong on every single level. So Mark's shaking his head over there. Maybe you thought my mom should pay double, but
No, I actually, right around the corner from you, and you can ask former Mayor Bergtower.
Yeah.
There was a young lady, they had just purchased their house on Harney, and she was bawling in front of the council. And the council looks at me like, Mark, what are we going to do? And that was the beginning. That was about 2013. And that person's, they had paid a very reasonable price. It's very reasonable housing. But they purchased a house that was one of their proudest moments, and then we hit them with a $7,000 assessment, I believe it was. And it was about a quarter of the value of the house.
And it just so happened she happened to live on a corner where, Otter Mill, all of that. And so, I mean, she complained to me, but she paid the bill. But there are so many people that don't have that opportunity or that funding source. So what we're talking about up here is very critical to the elderly, to our community that is at most at risk. We have to find a solution that works for everybody, but we also have to find a solution that is going to stand up legally and we can move forward with. And that is the challenge at this time. So I think every single person up here, I know every single person up here, and I rarely speak for everybody, wants to solve this problem. We just have to find the right legal avenue that's going to stand up, be sustainable, and work for the majority of the people. Thank you.
I have to ask, this was a resident who asked this recently. What happens if a special assessment is not paid? In other words, if the parcel owner pays the taxes but doesn't pay the special assessment?
I'll play attorney if Ms. Vanderhoek is uncomfortable with this, but I've been doing this for a while. When you pay your taxes, the first amount is applied to the special assessments, and then your taxes are delinquent. That's a very short version.
Mm-hmm. And if your taxes are delinquent for long enough, the county will foreclose.
Okay, that answers that question. The other question is, do we know, when this discussion first started about an alternative to special assessments, at that time, I want to say there was a rough estimate that about half of those special assessments that were not paid immediately by cash or whatever were put on what's called the city option, the multi-year, with an interest. And I believe it was this council who reduced that interest rate. So is that still kind of a rough that council has to borrow to do the work until that gets paid off? Are we still at a roughly 50% of folks are paying through the city financing?
I don't believe that information has been updated recently, but we did have a stretch of years where that was being analyzed by the finance department, and that was really where it was averaging out. It was around 50%. And then, there was another big chunk that was on a short turnaround, maybe the 5-year plan, and the remainder were out at about the 15-year plan.
So it's 5, 10, and 15, right, are the options?
Yeah.
It's paid in full on invoice, paid in full on your first tax bill, or 5, 10, 15.
And you can prepay, there's
Sure.
prepayment. We had run into some cash flow issues within the fund itself, and you'll recall that at their debt meeting, CIP meeting last week, Mr. Van Gompel pointed out that we had done some borrowing to get that fund back up to speed. We haven't needed to do that recently. I think Mr. Van Gompel's belief is that the fund is solvent, so we haven't had to borrow. But it's sort of like it's a separate business account center within the city. And if all the special assessments ended today, within about 15 years, the fund would zero out and we'd be done. That's, in theory, that's how it works. But there were some cash flow issues that we had to borrow a little bit. Now that's paying it back through special assessments, but we just do that for that purpose. But you have that option up to 15 years. And for some people, if it's a $15,000 assessment, that's $1,000 a year plus interest for 15 years. So you talk about affordability. I mean, I've heard affordability from several of you. And I think that's why the turn away from special assessments is picking up steam. There may be a little disagreement on the solution, but the problem, I think, as Mr. Miller said,
it's punitive.
I think you're universal that you want to figure out a solution, but you haven't come to agreement on that. So what I'm hearing is you'd like a closed session sooner rather than later, and for the newer council members, the report from 2019 on options. We can discuss other options, but certainly at least get you up to speed on what we had considered as policy options.
And I don't recall if that document included, there was quite a bit of discussion about whether or not it would go into effect, if there would be any kind of amnesty or forgiveness for folks in recent year or years who were still paying for, and then whether or not there would be any kind of retroactive, I guess, credit, if you will, or partial credit if you're still paying. So I just don't recall if that was in that document. I know there was a lot of conversation about it.
It was very, very little. I think there was, but it was pretty minor in the scheme of things. But I think we were looking at what, when we originally proposed the transportation fee, it was very similar to what Nina's doing. And Nina's had this fee in place for about 4 years now. They did something that was not, it was relatively minor. I guess that's the best way to put it. Relatively minor in the scheme of things. Did not make people whole on their special assessments, not even close to it. It was just a recognition that there's a little something there. I think it was a waiver for up to 5 years of the fee, that you wouldn't pay the fee for up to 5 years.
Councilmember Wojciechowski.
Thank you. Just to clarify, Mark, you said Nina, they're currently using a transportation utility?
They are calling it
something else.
A special assessment. Go ahead.
A special assessment replacement fee.
Yeah.
Is that pretty much what we're talking about?
Their methodology is different from what we have been directed to review, but yeah, that's essentially the same principle behind it. It's just their methodology is different.
Okay.
Was that based on ERU and
It was equivalent.
impervious surface?
Yes. And some of you may recall, we ended up doing a presentation at the league conference, and it was Nina did this, Oshkosh did this. Similarities, differences, and what did you learn? And it's like, don't be in Oshkosh's shoes, but Nina's been successfully implementing it for several years now.
And have they been sued?
I don't believe so.
Okay. I understand the fear of what might happen at the state, but I hope that doesn't hold us back, from making this some type of change at least. So I would hope that we will go forward with this, at least looking at it in closed session.
So we'll schedule that.
Speaking of closed sessions,
Yeah.
city manager's oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. The irony is not lost on me either, Madam Mayor, so go ahead, say it.
Mid-year review, July 26th.
So let me fill you in. I'm not trying to dodge my review. You did a couple jabs at me during strategic planning this afternoon. I can handle that. We may need to, and I'm looking at Ms. Nyforth, we may need to talk to you about a couple development agreements and some other items related to other development agreements. Now this and my mid-year review. I would not be offended if you delayed mine, because you got a lot to talk about. I will leave that up to you. But we already had a long day today. It could be a long evening. I did not discuss this with the deputy mayor. Deputy mayor has had this on the radar for quite some time. We could do mine on the August 10th meeting if you wanted to. And I would not be offended or worried or anything as a result of that. That way then you can get a couple of these things in.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, no, I'm seeing head nodding. The business of the city is, I'll be honest, the business of the city is more important than your mid-year review.
I disagree. We got 5 votes to can them. Let's get it over with.
So
I'll just go pack my box and go do your thing.
In the interest of moving those things forward, because there are timeliness issues with some of those things, I get the feeling that you're going to bring to us. Seems appropriate unless you organize, put together the 26th agenda to look like tonight's where it's relatively light.
Yeah.
It seems like that would be fine to push it back a little bit.
Yeah, originally I was thinking we could do some of these development agreements before the meeting and then just do mine afterwards. But these are piling up and I don't think we can get all of them done in an hour. And I think, and if you want to get into other questions, this is going to take time. And then I don't want you doing your review when you're tired and cranky, to be honest, though.
That hasn't worked well in the past.
So I think we can certainly wait. Now, if something changed.
How many are there? The development agreements that we're.
I would say up to 3.
Oh, okay.
Is the plan to meet before or after that meeting?
With this many, I don't think we can get done in an hour. I would do it after. Oh. Yeah.
And that would be August 10th? Okay.
Moving the mid-year to August.
Moving the mid-year to August 10th, but on the July 26th would be.
We'll still have one.
Our development agreement,
Yeah.
okay. And then we're at ARPA allocations for non-infrastructure purposes.
That's just, that's on my radar for us to have it. It'll probably be the August 10th meeting. Continuing to meet with some of the nonprofits. I've met with most of the larger ones. I've got one more. I've got to meet with AdvoCap. They had a request in, but I think I've met with about 2/3 of the groups. And I think I'll be able to make some recommendations. I'm not going to, I'll just give you just a overview. I don't think I plan to allocate the entire amount for a variety of reasons. Some of it is not a result of today's discussion, but when we had the discussion about homelessness and all the other complicating factors, I don't know if I'm ready to recommend spending things when we may have some other ideas that we're still trying to figure out. So I'll just leave it at that. I use the term, I like to keep my powder dry. I think we need to keep our powder dry a little bit, but there are some that I think we should move forward on very soon. These folks have been patient. They've been dealing with issues, and I think I can bring forward a number of recommendations for the council to act on.
If I may ask too, for future, I guess, agenda item in this vein, the beach building TIF, if we could get an idea of how that's been performing. As I understand it, that may or may not be involved in some of that discussion.
We can certainly, it's been performing, but if land use were to change, sell, it's gone. It expires. That's the beauty of a pay-as-you-go. Well, in that case, we'll go to exempt. If it's not assignable, it pretty much just ends. And what was the term? Did I hear you say? Oh, I thought you said something, Amy. Okay, never mind. But yeah, it essentially, our risk is gone. The property becomes tax exempt. Most standard language in our development agreements, if it becomes tax exempt, it's dead. And that would be the case if that were to become tax exempt.
Changes land use to.
There's a whole bunch of factors,
yeah,
but
okay.
the one the applicable in this discussion would be if it were to become tax exempt. And Councilmember Erickson and I had an interesting discussion about that today.
Okay.
So that's that. And then our next budget workshop isn't until August 30th.
And council member announcements and statements. Do we have anything from boards or commissions to share? It's been a long day. All right. Outstanding issues.
Happy to answer any questions you might have regarding that. I just want to make sure I get it. Here we go. Happy to answer any questions if you might have anything. They're going to need to be updated for the second quarter in advance of my mid-year review as well. So you'll get a more thorough written update shortly.
If I could just ask again about Lifeline rate. So this is the second time we've seen this. Other notes that said next steps would be determined by the next rate case. This is actually the second time that that's popping up. So is this in relation to a delayed discussion on the Clearwell project that a rate case would not be newly applied for?
No, because of the delay with the Clearwell project, we are proceeding with the other parts of that project that were going to be included, but we're really separate and distinct. James, real quick, some of those projects, I'll relate. You can just, the ozone and liquid oxygen,
Right.
Those projects we still got to proceed on. So with that, once we have an idea of what that cost will be, we can do a rate case. So it's
Okay.
just a matter of that. But obviously, there's a discussion about that a little bit happened today, and we certainly want to talk about that a little later.
And if I recall, and I don't know why, for some reason, April sticks in my head in relation to these rate case applications. Is that accurate? I may not be remembering that correctly.
You may recall that I've been putting dates here for
All right,
updates.
my mistake.
But just to keep it on the radar, so I don't ignore it.
All right. Council meeting for August?
Mr.
Yes.
Van Gompel just said he's certainly, he's
yes.
still here.
Oh, you're still with us, Russ?
I've been trying to spare him a little bit, but
Oh.
he cared enough to want to talk, and he's smiling, so I don't know if that necessarily means anything other than maybe
Yes.
his medications.
Well, I was going
working.
to chime in on the special assessment fee and transportation utility.
Oh, I'm
But
sorry,
you guys
Russ.
kind of got that sorted out. Ellers is working on an application to the PSC. There's nothing magical about an April timeframe. That's going to be coming up shortly.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Did everybody catch that? The audio was a little bit muffled. Yeah? Okay. Thanks, Ross.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, and then council meeting in August is moved to August 10th.
That's automatic per our code.
Per our code with regard to the August primary. And we will take a motion to adjourn.
Second. So moved.
All in favor? Aye.
Second. So moved.